When the Mitteler Rebbe was just 5 years old, Mitteler Rebbe was the son of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, called Reb Duber, who eventually turned out to be the great Chassidic master, but even from his young childhood was an extremely precocious, sensitive, holy little kid. His father took a teacher for him, a Melamed as they called it, Reber the Melamed. The place where they were learning was in the home of the local doctor, Rebbe Avrom. And one day, the Mitteler Rebbe, as I said, as a young child, overheard Rebbe Avrom bemoaning the fact that, he says, we're already far into Elul, and I haven't yet prepared the leeches. Leeches are kind of worms who actually, since the old times, apparently going back all the way to the times of Egypt, they've been used in medicine to treat nervous system abnormalities, dental problems, skin diseases, infections. Apparently today they're still used, and they're used in plastic surgery and other microsurgery. The reason? Because leeches secrete peptides and proteins that work to prevent blood clots. But what leeches does is it sucks out, apparently, the infectious blood. The Mitteler Rebbe heard that. Later on, when he came home after Cheder, the Mitteler Rebbe used to like to spend time sitting amongst the older Chassidim, the disciples of the Alter Rebbe, who they would sit and study and discuss next to the room of where the Alter Rebbe would have his own private room. And he would like to sit and hear what those Chassidim learn, what they say, what their small talk is. And at one point he noticed that they were talking about something, and they all burst out into laughter. This little young man, child I should say, was not impressed. And he turns around to them and he says, "We are deep into Elul. You haven't yet prepared the leeches. And you sit here laughing?" And he walked away. Chassidim, serious people, although he's a little child, but they knew who he is. They know he's a Mitteler Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe. They figured that this thought, this statement, the Mitteler Rebbe must have heard from his father, their great teacher, the Alter Rebbe. Now, when you hear something from your teacher, you take it seriously. And they started contemplating. They started meditating. What does the Alter Rebbe mean that we're deep into Elul and we haven't prepared yet all the leeches? How can we be sitting and just laughing? So they finally concluded. They said, what Alter Rebbe means supposedly is, just as leeches are used to draw out a patient's diseased and overheated blood, so too during the month of Elul, one should do away with one's negative desires, the blood of the Nefesh Abahamis, the desire, the strife, the excitement, the enthusiasm about negative issues, and we have to draw out all this blood in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Later on, this came back to the Alter Rebbe, this whole event, and the Alter Rebbe knew that he was not the one to share it, and he found out that actually he heard it just from Avram Melamed, who was talking from a medical perspective, because those leeches apparently can only be found during the summer months, and therefore you need to prepare it for the whole year. So the Alter Rebbe said then the following. The Baal Shem Tov tells us that everything that we hear, we should take a lesson in Avodas Hashem, in our service of God. And therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, whoever follows this path and uses all his physical things, all this that he hears and he comes across his whole life for the service of Hashem, says the Alter Rebbe, he will instill in himself and in his descendants a spark of inspiration for the servitude of Hashem. And Chassidim said that Rosh Hashanah was one of a level beyond they'd ever seen before. To the point that the floor was wet with tears from the Chassidim who were so impacted by this statement they heard from a young child. And then he said, on Simchas Torah, the shoes of the Chassidim were worn out and torn by the exuberant dancing, inspired by the Alter Rebbe's promise that this will be helpful in the service of Hashem. A thought to take serious. What's happening with our leeches? And what's happening with our negative blood within us? Let's get rid of it, and we'll have the promise of the Alter Rebbe giving us a wonderful, beautiful New Year. This year still.